Hey, hello. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dan Gerstein. I'm one of the co-founders of Pistol Shrimp. We're working on Freestar's Children of Infinity, sequel to the Urquan Masters, and joined by my co-founder and a very special guest.
And I guess that's my cue. I'm one of the co-founders of Pistol Shrimp, as well as half of the development of Urquan Masters many moons and lifetimes ago. I've done many games over the years since then, but we're not talking about those today.
I am Christine Love, and thank you so much for having me. I am the founder of Love Conquers All Games. In the past, I've made visual novels. Right now, I work on RPGs, and I'm excited to chat with y'all.
Great.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, so the unifying thing that's bringing us together, I mean, we could probably come up with a lot of stuff, but just to start us off, Christina, how did you find out about the Archon Masters? What was your experience of it like? How did you come into this circle?
I think I first played it around 2010 or so. It's been a while. I truth be told, I don't know what exactly it was that led me to it, other than like I'm a huge fan of science fiction, and it it just immediately grabbed me. There's I don't know, I love like the Star Trek fantasy, right? And this was like immediately pulling that with like, big cosmic space opera mystery, and um it just stuck with me. Like it's both the narrative, the sort of maximalist approach to like here is everything involving exploring the galaxy and learning this mystery. And I was additionally blown away by like, oh, I came into this pretty late, like much later than it came out, but like it still felt super fresh and new to me. This was like,
I was going to ask you about that, just because most of the people we've talked to are longtime industry veterans who kind of encountered it when it first came out, and you encountered it much later when it probably was dated in some ways, and um, so that's an interesting. You're an interesting test case.
no, it like I mean, obviously all games feel like dated to the era that they came out in, but there's just so much about it that felt like I don't know, especially like playing the version based on the 3DO version with all like the voice acting and right, and like combine that with like choices in dialogue and all these strange characters. It feels very I think you go into that now, and there's still a lot that feels very both fresh and compelling. Like it just immediately throws you into strange characters, and
That's
those
what we
those
want to
those
hear.
those,
Yeah,
those characters uh, like Fuifo or the Zotfot pick are always going to be weird and interesting, regardless of what era you play this in.
Yeah,
yeah.
actually.
We.
Oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Trey.
go ahead. No, I was just
Good.
going to say we one of our big inspirations was a science fiction author named Jack Vance. I don't know whether you've encountered him, but
No.
um, he he started in maybe late 40s, early 50s, but wrote he lived pretty long and wrote probably up until the 2000s and maybe some into the 2000s. But anyway, he was a master of that kind of humor of sort of taking a kind of a human trait to exaggeration and making the character go all in on that exaggeration such that it's not funny to that character, but because you recognize that the extreme of that human behavior, it's funny to you, um, even though the character himself is kind of playing his role totally straight. um, so that was a big influence on us, for Urquan Masters.
That's really interesting. I definitely see that. Another thing like I felt was interesting about I don't know, like it's the character writing that jumps out to me, obviously, as like as a writer myself and like someone who latches onto the narrative aspects. But I did really love like instead of having characters, you have like just entire alien species that are just basically like fill-ins for their entire, there's some concepts of individuals, but by and large, every Pakunk speaks for the Pakunk. Every Arilu is simply the one little green guy you talk to, and they're still like very strongly characterized. Like it's a level of abstraction that just makes perfect sense for the scale that the story is. You never stop and think like, oh, it's a little weird that like I've only ever talked to two different Urquan. It's just like, yeah, like that's a character. You think of them as having these characteristics, and I don't know, they're compelling enough and interesting in terms of characterization that like it just makes perfect sense. Like that level of abstraction just immediately vibes with, the player.
Yeah, it's a really it's funny having like it's cool that you like pick up on that and also like it and love it because it's one of the things like I'm also people know this, but like I'm a late player of the Archon Masters too. I didn't, I actually thought it was just ship combat when I was younger. That was what I encountered and I played it a lot, but I didn't know there was a story until much later. But it's interesting that you call that out because it's so powerful. And I like that used the word abstraction too. That's one of those at least in my experience, challenging things to describe, where it's sort of like you'll actually be happier with this than without it. Buy into the abstraction if you stop and think about it because you're not playing the game or you're thinking, well, what would this be like? Or what do I want now that I'm done playing the game? Wouldn't it be nice to get to know some more individuals? Your brain can go there. It's very easy and natural, but it's such a useful tool. And I actually like one of the things I enjoy too, working on this is leaning into that and accepting the abstraction and saying, well, you know what, because of this, how can we leverage it? And, we might even, sure, I don't think the Urkon Master did this, but I can even imagine, well, we can make jokes about it. The characters who aren't that, in Urkon Masters stand out so much more because they are individuals. Like, there are Spathi, but, Fwifo, Fifo, however we want to say, everybody, I like also hearing everybody's pronunciation. That's not a, seriously, it's one of the cool things about like games and reading and writing is just like nobody told you how to feel about this. You get to feel about it. But anyway, Fwifo would be he stands out even more as an individual, right? Because he is one of the few individuals. And I like that as a tool too. Like that's pretty, I don't know, that excites me. I don't know
People
if
get
you
attached
sort
to
of
him. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like, and there's even like a running joke in our fan community is like, if Fwifo dies, it's technically game over. You can't keep playing, even though, yes, you can, obviously. One moment, I have a bird here, but
Yeah. And then Tanaka,
technically, I have a lot of birds here.
Oh,
the blind show Fixty, and Admiral Zex, and there's some good memorable individuals.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like the one that sticks out in my mind, other than Fwifo, obviously, is the talking pet who is it exists to suffer, and then you're like, oh, well, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, you don't feel bad for him.
Even
Really
though,
does a lot of good work to make sure you don't.
yeah, but then at the end, you kind of need its help too. So, turnabout.
Yeah,
So,
and then he's screaming at you, and you still don't feel that bad.
Yeah, you leave him to blow up.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What happened to, I'm not worried. It's okay. Whatever happened to him is fine. He deserves it. But I'm actually curious too because you did bring up like that abstraction too, and when you played it, had you like? Sorry if I have some of your own history wrong, but were you working on games before you played the Archon Masters?
Um, I had not really like gone into game development professionally at that point. This was sort of this would have been very early in my career. The first thing I did in games was I made a game called Digital Love Story that like I didn't think of as a game. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm writing interactive science fiction, and it hit the game blogs, and they were like, oh, cool game. I'm like, oh, all right. I do like I love games. If you're calling it that, sure, let's lean into that. And that was sort of the point where my career started. And to me, this was just like one more thing that I saw out of this. There's this very big boom in like indie games in 2010, right? And sort of you're seeing a lot of like mechanically experimental stuff coming out of like very small teams, like one or two people working on stuff. And I think at the same time, like games like Dear Masters and like the open source project was just like sort of lumped in there with like here are some other like you know older things that are continuing in like that are linked to the modern, I mean modern as of 2010 idea of the the indie game, right? And it was cool not just like play a great game, but also like go, oh, this we're part of a long chain of history here. This is not like this is not doing anything totally new. There's always been small teams doing,
Yeah, that's all there
you know.
was way back when. I mean, there were the beginnings of EA and stuff like that, but yeah, mostly it was small developers who would contract with a publisher who often didn't have any internal development.
Hmm. And that just sounds way more familiar to me than, like 100-person AAA team. Like I don't know anything about that. That's not that's whatever paradigms they're working in. They're often not necessarily relatable to the sort of things I'm working on. So, seeing something so big coming from uh a small team like that has to like also develop technologies that go along, like that's very familiar.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna apologize if I keep backpedaling here. So you weren't trying to make a game because I downloaded that executable. I had that too. You were was the intent wasn't a game? How did that come about?
So I was involved. I'd read a lot of visual novels, which are sort of they're better known now, but at the time they weren't quite so well known. It was a lot of Japanese stuff, and they were pulling from, I would say, they feel like they were thinking of themselves as a little more literary. And like I was, before I got into even doing visual novels, I was just like writing pure prose. I was writing like novels, short stories, that sort of thing. I've never ended up published that. I think my video game stuff is the only stuff that's actually worth reading. But I was coming at it from that angle. And I was like, oh, interactivity brings in these interesting elements. Or like visual novels have like visuals, obviously, music, choices, all these sorts of things. I was still coming at it from the angle of like, I'm just trying to tell stories. I was thinking of stories as like things that with like books that, you turn pages, but clicking through and like having choices and having illustrations to go with that, that just felt like a natural extension to me. And I just took it one step further, which was digital, which is this game that's set in the BBS era. You're on a computer, you're exchanging letters with a girl and get sucked into a mystery. And I was just thinking like, oh, this is like an epistolary novel, right? This is like Dracula style story told entirely through letters. It's just that you're clicking on the letters. And in interactivity, right? Like, what is the edges between what is a game, what is a visual novel, what is like, um, like you can have stories like this in print, even like choose your own adventure novels. We're doing this too with no computers at all. Like, it's all just so blurry and porous that like I was sort of pushing the edges around that I didn't realize that I stepped over a threshold into games.
I love it. Happy accidents. I didn't even know what I was doing, and then someone told me what I was doing. That's really that's a happy place to be. I mean, assuming you were happy to start going down that road. And I mean, you said you're working on RPGs now before we are
Yep.
talking too. So like how I guess I have so many questions. I'm so interested. My trajectory and Fred's trajectory was Fred, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's I'm going to make a game, right? And I know I want to make a game and I'm going to do some steps to get towards that, right? So the like the sideway, I don't know, it's sort of like a tidal wave pulling you in or something. That trajectory is so interesting to me. So I don't know. I'm sorry if I can like ask questions around that. If you want
Yeah,
to get more into the present, okay.
absolutely. No, no, let's do
Well,
it.
I'm just so I'm really curious. So I felt just for me personally, like I fell into I mean visual novels. I have a hard time rocking some of the genre terms. Interactive fiction. It's sort of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like metal genres. It's like, is it dark death black metal or is it melodic symphony metal? And I'm like, I don't know. It's a bunch of people with guitars and drums. What's going on here? But anyway, jokes aside, like I think I fell into more of those when I started playing the Persona games, actually. That was sort of my first foray into that. And even maybe even before that, like Phoenix Wright is sort of like mystery detective games. And if I go way back, I'm in like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, which started to feel like that, or Monkey Island, things like that. But more contemporary things were sort of like, oh, there's sort of a resurgence of genre happening, right? And Phoenix Wright is sort of where I encountered it. And then obviously there's a lot of RPG going on in a Persona game. But for you, like because you were working from the, okay, this is a straightforward story. I just want to tell a story with characters and things like that. What was the entry into, oh, wait, now I have interactivity? Like, were there immediate lessons? Were there things you didn't know until you got there? Like, what was the transition like? Or was it, oh, I'm already doing this, I just didn't know? Like, what was the transition for you, I guess, into adding interactivity to that stuff?
I think the big thing, like the first big question I came across when I was doing digital, because like I wanted to give the feeling of like you're sitting at a computer and you never see your responses to people. You only see the messages that people send to you. You hit reply, and like then they'll get back to you with like hinting at what they said. And like this is because I thought about it and I was like, if I really think it's important that you have the feeling of being in front of a computer, because like like the whole UI like is styled to look like an Amiga, right? Like it's like very like you're typing in phone numbers to dial. It makes modem noises. Like it was that facade was very important to me. If like it had like you choosing options, like if it was like like here's three possible responses you could say, you'd go, wait a minute, you don't do that when interacting with a computer though. You type stuff out. But like typing stuff out, that's interactive fiction does this by like having really, really restrained interactions, right? Like parser IF has to work so hard to make that make sense. And like in a game about writing letters, it was just like, well, that's a difficult problem. So I guess here's one layer of abstraction. It's just like you just sort of have to take it as a given that like all your words are, you're the silent protagonist. You're Link in Zelda, right? You don't say anything, but like whatever you say has to be so straightforward that it's like it's what the player would have said anyway. It's what you think you would have said. So as a result, like the writing does have to like morph around that, right? Like whenever someone like says something to you, it has to be structured in a way that like your response is obvious. And that does like limit the sort of story that you can tell around like that if you have that sort of conceit. I've sort of moved away from that. Later games I've done have had like much more stronger voice protagonists. They've had like more like choices. They've had like characters that like have their own personalities, and you're sort of embodying that. Like it's just like I'm gonna have fun pretending to be this cool person. Whereas before I was like, I need you to feel like you're sitting in front of the computer directly. But either way, these are questions that like are not going to come up when you're writing a novel, right? Like you might think about like, is my protagonist relatable? But you aren't going to be thinking necessarily about like how does the story constrain around making sure their voice is completely in alignment with the reader. And I don't know, there's just so many things. Another thing that like I've really learned, I've really come across is that when doing especially like a visual novel, I want if the player does something like if the player character does something cool, it has to be a choice. It has to be like you clicked an option that made you do the cool thing. You can't just like, you know, someone does something and then like your character responds automatically. You have to like, it has to be you picking, I'm going to do the impressive thing. I'm going to say whatever the turnaround is that shuts them up. I'm going to like, and you mentioned Ace Attorney. Ace Attorney does this all the time, right? It's constantly asking you for evidence, even in places where, like, obviously, what you're doing. You already know what the murder weapon is. There's just one more time. Can you tell me what it is? And then you hit the button, and then Phoenix Wright goes into his big decisive music blaring
Yeah.
decisive evidence delivery, and you feel like, oh yeah, I did that. So otherwise, like I don't know, like you have like video game cutscenes where like you watch a character do something cool, and it's just like that's not me. I didn't do that. So that was another big one, and you sort of have to like structure your story around like everything cool happening has to be something they did, and there has to be a way to turn it into. there's a button you pressed and then something cool happens.
We had similar challenges when we were doing the original Urquan Masters, where not so much with the narrative, but just with the kind of the core gameplay. And you mentioned Star Trek earlier too, where I program modes where you pick like landing parties to go down on the planets, and you could pick from the aliens that were part of that you were allied with. And so if the leader of the landing party was a Spathy, well, maybe he would be cowardly and things wouldn't happen. But what it ended up being was you were doing some bookkeeping to have sort of computer agents do the thing for you. And so we just, in cases like that, we said, the player should really be doing the work here, not his agents. And so we made you land with a lander and drive it around and do stuff. And we feel that was a much better decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's definitely like moments there where like I don't know, you could imagine like having like you assigned an alien that's better at dealing with those awful earthquakes, right? But you feel so cool when you just like slip pie one and then like hit like nope, 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 eject, eject, eject. That's like that's way more satisfying even if like
Yeah,
you think about like who is the player in the Archon Masters, right? Like, are you the captain of the ship making decisions? Are you piloting the ship? Are you piloting every ship? Are you piloting the lander? Realistically, this is probably like 30 different people, right? But it's way more fun to like be in both
exactly.
control of the lander and
Yeah.
also the oars ships even like even though it makes no sense that like you're in control of the oars, really? That seems unlikely, but playing that just it feels right.
Yeah, I mean, I think abstraction is the key word there, right? And you were well, both of you were talking about how like it's way cooler. I mean, nobody's going to be asking questions if you get the feeling of I did it or oh I failed or whatever. That emotional investment that comes just from raw interaction, I think like in just raw writing, pure writing, especially people will talk about like plot holes and oh this doesn't connect and oh wait a minute this thing doesn't tie oh don't have their canon right oh they're shifting it and now in like look at comic books they have as many universes as they need to tell as many stories with Spider-Man or whatever. But the thing that I I get really drawn to is in these games, like Phoenix Wright also is a good example of this, where it is ridiculous to a fault, but I'm not asking questions if I'm having fun. And so the amount of like acceptable abstraction in like film, you could call it suspension of disbelief or whatever, all those things I'm not thinking about that if I'm in the moment. And those, I'm not saying everybody will appreciate everything in the same way, but if you can offer that high, I think it is through the player's input and the way the player gets to relate to your game world. And like one of the things I think is cool with interactive fiction is you have so much control over it. And even you were talking about it, right? Where you said, well, I'm not going to show the players like in your first project, I'm not going to show what the player writes at all. They get to imagine that. Like I'm curious, like as you were working on that, like, was that sort of an empowering and exciting thing, or was it like a big brick in the road that you had to drive around each time? Like, how did you evolve that and build a relationship with it? And, also I'm curious what feedback you got on it, because kind of like the all aliens are the same alien, some people actually, maybe don't like that abstraction. They wish they could meet, I want to meet more Spathy. Fufu's nice, but show me some more. So I'm just curious, like, how did you receive it? Like, how did you discover it? How did you feel about it? And how did others feel about that?
I think players are always gonna like want to poke at the edges of like they're always gonna want to know a little bit more if that's not just in general. I think players always want to know a little bit more, but I do think uh, a lot of the feedback I got directly at the time was that people really felt like they were transported to this other era. And part of it was that like, the sense of time and place was so strong that it sort of overrides the rest of your personality there, right? And like an obvious way to do this is to make the character like the player character an outsider, and that way, you've just been introduced to this. in my follow-up visual novel Analog, you like come across like an old spaceship, and like you've never encountered this before. You're learning about this mystery like raw. So as an outsider, you have all the big questions, and that way I can sort of make the like, your in be very universal. Um, when I made digital like with like this blank slate player protagonist, I a lot of people were surprised, for example, to find out that like the writer of it was a woman. Like they actually were surprised by this because they were like, oh, it's a heterosexual love story. I know this. I'm like, no, it was just written by a lesbian. That's just like I think you can bring too many of your preconceptions to that if you're doing that. Like, and I don't know, it is more fun to often embody characters. I do feel like that's like I've sort of with time I've just found it's more and more interesting to like I'm gonna invent a person for the player to take the role of, and trust me, it's gonna be fun to play as her. She's got some she reacts to stuff in weird ways. You're gonna love it. I think it really just depends on like what are the assumptions being brought in. You, uh, let's go back to Ace Attorney. I love Ace Attorney.
Sure.
Half of what makes that great is like Pink's Wright is really stupid, right? He's you're playing as an idiot who's flying by the seat of his pants. That's a fun role to play. Those are fun shoes to step into.
Yeah. And he has, the like a lot of the charm that video game protagonists don't get to express as much, especially in Western games, is self-doubt. And he has so much inner dialogue that you get to experience as a player. Nobody else in the game hears, where he just is thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm the biggest." He knows he's an idiot too. That also makes it funny. So that when you're the player and you're solving clues, you're like, "Wow, I'm so smart. It's not him, it's me."
Yeah, but it's also like a hell of a trick for like designing puzzles, right? Uh, it works perfect with the gameplay. Cause like you're usually like two steps ahead of him, but you always know what the next thing to say is. You're always like, "Come on, just the murder weapon. It's right there. Here's where it happened. I know you haven't caught up yet, but as a result, like the puzzle design is never you're thinking like, all right, I need to explain this two steps ahead. It's just like, please, get on to the next level, please.
Yeah, it is a pacing thing. I actually do really enjoy Phoenix Wright games, but I can't play them back to back because I kind of feel like that inhabiting that character, there's a pacing challenge for me emotionally, where I feel like, wait, am I doing the same thing all over again? I thought I showed you. I taught you this. You learned last time. What about the last cases? I played that game. So yeah, it's funny.
Always needs to forget everything for the tutorial of
I forgot how to do my job. Oh, right, my badge. Yes, I am an attorney. I remember. There's more jokes to be there. But okay, so wait, but back to okay. I like being Phoenix Wright sometimes. I don't know if I could be Phoenix Wright all the time because it's a bit much, but also his universe has a lot of very verbose people, and kind of like how I'm enough for me. I don't need one more person like me. That's kind of
That's why it
oh,
works with me.
yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Man, many words, few words. There we go. But so the idea of it's more fun to inhabit a character, and like just what you said is really powerful. Like, I'm gonna make something for you and I promise you're gonna love it. Like, that's a cool thing to offer and a cool thing to say. I'm wondering, like, well, here's just a kind of off the wall question. Did you play Unpacking?
no, I haven't played it yet.
Okay, that's okay.
God, I'm so behind on everything.
Join the club.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
Yes, yeah, it's you're either working on a game or you're playing a game, usually
Or,
not both.
or you're working on a game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're working on a game, exactly. Well, anyway, I brought this as an example. Maybe I can think of some other ones, but that's one where it's kind of an inversion. I mean, I don't know if you know much about it, but I can kind of give you
Another premise, yeah.
the premise. So it's kind of an inversion of the silent protagonist, which is I called it actually to someone else we were talking to an inverse detective story where you can figure out what's going on, but it doesn't actually advance the story. It's kind of a sideways goal. You figure things out, what's going out, or sorry, you figure out what's going on only by playing the game, but playing the game has a gameplay loop that is kind of tangential to figuring out the story. So it's kind of like a detective game without trying to be a detective game. Like you're not trying to solve the puzzle, you're trying to solve the physical puzzle, but then what happened is a question. So back to like, oh, I'm gonna make this character and you're gonna love them. How like how do you feel about like even what you said, one of the things I liked about our Crown Masters is I could project myself onto the captain. And even, I mean, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, until the very, very end, there is a cinematic, there is one picture of who that character is. You actually never see that character. Your kind of touch points with who you are the UI, the name, right? You can name yourself. And then that's pretty much it. I guess what your ship looks like, but that's still just you designing the ship. It's very abstract who the captain is. What do they look like? What, what's that person supposed to be like? When you're introducing a character and you say, "Oh, trust me, like I want you to love this person. You're going to inhabit them." Like, what's the first date like? Like, how do you introduce the player, and say like, "Trust me, you'll love being in these shoes."
I mean, it really depends on, like what the context is. It's always I do feel like I don't know, introductions are hard, right? I feel like this is like sort of the thing that like I spend so much time like rewriting like is like just the start of the game. How do you introduce everything, but also like not take too much time and also like, you know, convey it in a way that's like satisfying immediately, but also like doesn't make the player get dismissive. I don't know. It's like it's a really tough balancing act. Something this makes me think about is just like introductions, tutorials, and all this. They're the hardest thing in the world. And like I've my most recent game, Get in the Car Loser. I played the tutorial like just the opening 30 minutes so many times, just like constantly. You have to go through this. And I was thinking about this when I was watching Al did that the stream of the Yurko Masters, and like it's like, oh yeah, I've seen the start of this game a lot too. Not even like an order of magnitude on the same scale as as you have, I'm sure. But like it's a strong intro, and like it has to explain so many things. And I don't know, something I think about is that like comedy feels to me like one of the good ways to like make explanations go down smoothly. Like if there's something totally new to the player, often like, all right, here's the interaction, then here's a joke, then seriously, you need to learn how the interaction works. I wonder, actually, I'd love to hear a little more about how that how the Yurkon Masters approaches that, just because like I feel like comedy is like so important to um just the characters in general, but especially that introduction.
Which the going to Earth part or the
Yeah, the going to
yeah
Earth, going to Pluto, just like everything
yeah
around those first 20 minutes are.
yeah that was tough. We had so many goals in mind with setting the feeling for the game. We wanted you to feel totally insignificant to start, and so that when you became super powerful later in the game, after your journey, you would appreciate the journey you went through and how you sort of mastered the universe, kind of. And a lot of people have said, "Well, why didn't you just make hyperspace take you instantly to the next star?" And we said, "Well, learning how to learning how to run is important, and appreciating how you learned how to run." And then in terms of the aliens were all, well, not all of them were funny, but we we were very careful to make them funny, but only but they were committed complete. They were serious. They always felt they were serious and that you were the weird one. And and we were always very careful to respect them, but to have them be so serious and so fanatic about who they were that it would just naturally create funny situations. And your responses could be jokey. There is usually a range of jokey, serious, straight, whatever, and that was okay because they wouldn't understand the joke anyway. Um, and it probably would just enrage them if they thought you were joking. But so there was definitely a difference between how he treated the aliens and the captain, um, allowing them to actually tell jokes or joke about something while the aliens were funny, but they weren't joking.
Yeah,
That
I'm
makes a
actually
lot of sense.
curious because I know I told Fred, you and Paul my version of what my beginning experience of the Orcode Masters was like, but do you remember like how often that changed or how many iterations it went through, or was it the last thing you touched? I mean, I have my own experience on games and I feel like changing the intro is the thing that happens the most. I'm curious what it was like on
Uh,
Orcode Masters.
it didn't go through a lot of revisions, I don't think. The one thing was that we had a number of different writers. So almost every alien got a different person writing that alien, and we let them we let them use their own voice for the most part, um, with with direction about how that you respect the alien. The alien doesn't joke, but here's the stuff he knows. Here's how it needs to be given out, um, and here's just sort of general parameters for how you will meet them, and then we let them pretty much go. Now we did edit stuff after the fact, but I think it really helped that we had different people writing the different aliens.
That's interesting. I can definitely see that. You say the intro didn't go through a lot of changes. Did you do like a lot of play testing of like what is it like to have someone who's thrown in completely into the deep? Because I know for me like part of why like I iterated so much on getting the car was because like I show this at like PAX and you're going through like a ton of people who are like a little bit distracted playing the game and I'm like, all right, this is perfect. I need to make sure they understand it. If they understand it, it's fine. Um, and like I'm constantly taking notes, watching over their shoulders, seeing like what bits they're getting confused by. Like at one point there is just like a whole other menu like in battles where like you press a button, then you like have to like cursor over an enemy, then press a button, and like no one understands this. I'm watching people struggle over it. I'm like, all right, just get rid of that menu entirely. And that's something I can do because like modern tool chains and like working with Unity, it enables gutting huge portions of that and replacing it. But I'm wondering, like at the time, like was this sort of testing like something that you felt like it could do, or like was it just like you make a decision and
No,
so much work goes into it that you sort of have to?
well, because we were creating kind of an open world where a lot of it was generated, um, pretty early on, we had testers. Accolade was our publisher. There were testers at Accolade who would just be flying around the universe, kind of testing the universe, test without a lot of uh, conversations necessarily dropped in and stuff like that. So we were pretty confident in sort of the core gameplay without meeting the aliens, that at least it was understandable. Now, a lot of people have trouble with inertia and steering their ship in the beginning, and they overshoot
Yeah,
things, and so. But back then, games were brutal, and like King's Quest, and um, they they were not forgiving at all, and we felt like at the time that what we were making was really forgivable because you could beat the game almost up until the very end of it. Um, there were very few things. Well, really wasn't anything you could do that prevented you from winning the game other than running out of the time that
Mm.
because if you needed to get something from an alien and the Korra started their death march and wiped out that alien, you could fly to their planet and the thing would just be lying there on the planet. So
Oh,
so you could always finish the game. You just wouldn't get the story, maybe, if you let the Korra kill everybody. But that was super forgiving. And so really the hard part for us was breadcrumbing what you maybe want to do next, because we didn't force you to do anything next. And so the key was to give you the information soon enough and often and repeated enough so that you got the idea, oh, maybe I should go here now. But we never really uh, forced you to go places. That was that was probably the toughest thing to I won't even say we got it right, but the toughest thing to do was to breadcrumb the player so that he felt like he always had something to go after.
I definitely do feel like that forgivingness is part of like why, like the game's so accessible even now. Like I won't say that like I didn't have to like, look up like some hints of like like the in-game explanation of Rainbow Worlds, for example, was I just need a little bit more of a push, and that's fine. You look at a wiki, whatever. I'm sure at the time it was the same thing, but like just in general, like the way that there's so much information in game, just nudging you in the right direction. I think that's how you can play it in 2010 or 2024, and like it still feels like it's very approachable, even if you're not in a way that like although you mentioned King's Quest, right? Like those games are it's pretty hard to play a Sierra adventure game these days. I don't think most people have myself included, don't have the patience for that. Whereas like I don't know, I think Urquan Masters is on that line, but also like hinting is so hard, right? Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like,
Yeah.
is there a perfect? There's just, you know, if you
Yeah.
explain too much, if you just say they're in an arrow, go here, 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 and here, that's people are going to feel unsatisfied that they didn't get to, like do something, like they didn't get to do the exploration.
Yeah.
But
Well,
also, if you
go
don't
ahead.
say it, like some people will miss it.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
you have to like, it feels like a balancing act to me.
It is a balancing act, and we would give the relevant information to a few different aliens, and so you would hear about it from them, but you would hear about it through their lens of looking at, who they were. And so it wouldn't necessarily be just a retelling of what you heard from somebody else. It would be a retelling, but with an unreliable narrator kind of. And so if you got that retelling often enough with just some minor differences and uh, funniness from how it was told by different aliens, as you compared the two stories, um, it that helped.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
It's funny, like I'm very hung up on the intro because Fred's heard me say this too. Like I actually there's a lot I appreciate about in the Urcon Masters, but the intro is so strong. It was cool to hear you bring that up too, because that's something I connect with a lot, and I've thought about too, even as we work on our sequel. Like, okay, how does this game start? Right, is a huge question. But even just doing the analysis on why it's so successful, I can at least start with a funny story, which is the intro gives you so little information that when the information comes, Fred's heard the story, you know what it is. And I'm not the only person to tell this story. And I
Uh,
still remember I will do a reenactment of when I told this to Paul and exactly what he did in the chair. But um, it starts and you head to Earth, and then there's the probe that comes in and it says, "Attention, interloper, this is Urquan space. You're trespassing." And it says, "Get out of here," right? Or you will be punished, right? It says in the Kazer's Oz voice. Me, as a player who doesn't know anything, said, "Oh, that thing told me to run. I better leave. And I didn't go to Earth. I never went to Pluto, and I just took off. And I immediately got crushed by probes. And you talk about looking up stuff on a wiki. I basically just did the game only told me to do one thing, which is run away. At least that's how I interpreted it. And I'm like, I'm running away, but I keep dying. What's wrong? I eventually looked up on wiki. It says, don't run away. And so what I told this to Fred and Paul, I remember I was actually in the room where Fred is sitting right now, recalling this story, and Paul goes, "Oh, the red probe." I was not the first person to make this mistake, apparently.
Well, a
Oh
lot
my
of
God.
people, you start on the edge of the solar system. A number of people just turn around and leave. They don't even go in to find the probe, and then they die very quickly. But
Yeah, the art for me, or it's funny thing about tutorials and like, gosh, you want to know the fastest way, especially like my gaming time is limited and there's too many games to play. That's my big complaint. Stop making games, people. Here I am talking to people make games. Shoot. But biggest thing to like for me to just I'll either grin and bear it if I'm interested in something or will just get me to stop playing is over tutorialization of like, okay, another pop-up, okay, another pop-up, okay, another pop-up, right? We all know what that friction feels like. And so, it's easy and trite to say, well, less is more, just don't do as much. But it's more like, well, why is less more and what's the pacing and how does it work? And one thing that I really appreciate about like older games that just did this naturally when I look to them for inspiration is, well, they didn't really have the opportunity to even try to teach the player anything. They kind of gave you a playground and said, go, go bang your head against the metal toys. This isn't child proofed, but in a way it was by the creators because they decided. I mean, yes, Sierra games are cool. I can't play a Sierra game anymore. I mean, even back then, I think I would play it holding a hint book in my hand, nervously shaking or something. Like, oh, what if I click the wrong pixel? Oh no,
Then
terrified
you'll
of
die
failure.
probably.
Yeah, then I die. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's just my upbringing. This is my life. But but one of the things that I like about, the Urquan Masters and a lot of older games, is they didn't even have an opportunity to try to, tell and not show. It was like, well, what are your inputs? You can fly your ship forward, you can turn. What can you do? How does the game react to your inputs? Oh, I'm learning by doing. And so one of the reasons, like for me, I think that beginning is really successful is there's not a lot of inputs. The player, and also the game doesn't punish you for getting lost. I mean, except when it does, and then it punishes you brutally and you might be a little confused and it yeah, maybe it can put you on track. There's no one size fits all, but there are games, modern games, that do this kind of thing too. And I really, I was describing, I mean, Breath of the Wild, it's just such an easy example. It's like, well, they they didn't want you to run everywhere. They kind of wanted you to learn some things, and they have a lot to teach you, but they still gave you a pretty big plateau to run around on before you fell off into the world. And it was very much stumble along. And the breadcrumbing, of course, is the art, and easy to just wave my hand and say, oh, yeah, it works. But there's a lot of artful breadcrumbing there. But with older games, especially, I appreciate the kind of necessity of not being able to explain things. And it's really about let the player feel it. I don't know. This is a very San Francisco thing. Have you, Fred? Maybe I don't even know your question answer. Have you ever been to the Tactile Dome in the
yeah,
Exploratorium?
yeah,
Chrissy, do you know what the Tactile Dome is?
I've been to the Exploratorium. It's incredible.
Okay, so okay, we have it's incredible for me too. I have a childhood stories about it, but the Tactile Dome is sort of for me like what I think of when I think of it as an intro, which is I'm in a room. It's pitch black. What are my inputs? What can I do? Well, I can touch. Okay. I know which way I came in. I have to figure out where to go. I have to decide if I care what's in here or if I just want to find the exit because it's a maze, quote unquote. You could just run through the tactile dome if you want. But it's almost about taking things away from the player and saying you only have these inputs. And that for me is like, again, easier said than done, but that's the art, quote unquote, of like, what do you take away from the players so that they can't get themselves too hurt and can't get themselves too lost, or if they're getting lost, they can have fun with it.
I feel like my greatest fear is like a player going, okay, but get to the point. Come on, just show me the part that I'm here for. and I think that's why like humor helps that go down so well, is that like if you have like at least some funny jokes in there, like it's a good it's threading them along. If you have something satisfying in there, it's threading them along. Like I think in Intercon Masters, if you just had the commander at the space station in Seoul, it wouldn't quite be enough. I feel like FIFO being there is like part of like how that sequence can go on for so long. It's not just very stoically telling you here's what you're gonna have to do. You've also like had a goofy interaction. You're
Yeah.
like, all right, let's before we get out into the big pond where I'm gonna have to learn like a ton of things. You know,
And you meet a
you've gotten
crippled ship.
teases. Yeah, you got like stuff teasing what
Yeah.
the greater world is gonna be like at least. And I don't know, tutorialization is just like such a tough thing because I feel like you don't want the player going, all right, get to the point. I'm tired of introduction. I'm tired of lore. I'm tired of all this. But you also don't want them to get into the game without realizing that like you have to do something fundamental. And like you mentioned, just like leaving the solar system immediately at the start, but like you're gonna get a game over quickly at least. Like that's like a good like stern, like, all right, you did something wrong. That's not correct. You didn't like make a mistake that's gonna stick with you for like 20 hours, right?
Yeah.
That's you learn immediately. Um, or like I don't know. I love like the pressure of the Slylandro probes. The fact that there's increasingly more of them unless you do something about them makes you go, okay, probably don't fight them every time. Probably there's something I need to learn how to do because this is just getting overwhelming. Like having pressures that cause the player to learn something is good, but it's just hard. It's hard to get that balance perfect.
Yeah. I think we were I think it was too hard, the Slylandras. I mean, you could still get through it, and maybe that made you feel better once you were through it, but I think it was a little too hard.
I
Plus
I
one.
can definitely say that. I feel like I had at least one playthrough where I think I just like I was like these are brutal. I'm just gonna juice the turning radius on the main ship enough that I can just like immediately destroy them. Like wow, these are great for resources. And
Yeah.
that was probably me learning the wrong lesson there.
No, no,
That
that
did
was
not that
no.
did not encourage me to find
That was a fine lesson to learn. Yeah.
I mean it's still, learning about like interactions in the game and like that is part of the game's vocabulary.
Yeah. That was we didn't we didn't have a lot of time to work on balance um of the adventure game. The melee was something that was a holdover from the previous game. And but getting the adventure game well balanced was uh we didn't spend a lot of time on that because we didn't have a lot of time.
That's interesting. I feel like it works out pretty well. I think honestly, like I think about when I think about balance in Urcon Masters, I think about like how good avatars are, right? Like or the Ors ships. And
Nemesis.
like it's just like yeah. And like I don't know. It feels weird that like the backbone of your of your fleet is the oars, right? It's like, huh, that's a little unsettling. This might cause problems later, but for now, I guess
Yeah.
it's helping us fight the Urquan. Or like the Avatar being so powerful, it's like that's not a problem. I don't want to see that. I'm sure in Melee it caused like a lot of like you got to balance carefully around like fielding them, but in the adventure, yeah, of course Avatar should be powerful. Wow, these
Yeah,
Chimera are great.
it can be totally unbalanced in the adventure game. And really in Melee it was a rock, paper, scissors sort of relationship anyway. And so the way we balanced things in Melee was to just make the costs kind of appropriate so that if you had a budget for your team, you wouldn't be able to spend it all on Schmers, or well, you could, but that's putting all your eggs in one basket.
Mhm.
There was something I was going to say about the Chimera and the oh, um, I don't recall, but oh no, it was the oars. Yeah, we had if we'd had time, there was going to be some quasi space stuff with the oars in the Arilu, and but we didn't have time.
I I I would have loved to see that, but also like I think I think I really love about the game is just like there's so much, right? There's just so many hints at things. Like the galactic history is so big. It doesn't matter that like I don't know the deep mysteries of the Ors or the Mycon when like I'm already getting one like really big mystery here, right? Like the League and the Diari and the and Yurquan. Like that's so big and just on the edge is like wow, there's so much more history and
Yeah, and
I'm definitely
we never intended for you to know it all. So
and I don't know like even in the game, I know that like in my first playthroughs, like there are entire aliens that just like I never saw. Like even like it's just easy to miss
yeah,
like
the Supax or the Utwig or the
yeah. Yeah, no, there's several that are just like you know that their space exists. You see the circles, but like this is or like the big gap and like wow, space is so big that but I'm already getting such a big story and I feel like that's like knowing that there's some of those edges are real and some of those edges are not real is part of what makes this feel like so large and so compelling and so I don't know like it's real, right? It's not just this isn't a galaxy that just has one story in it. There's not just one mystery here and you got to the bottom of it and now you have the complete picture. This is just you learn the thing that was causing the most trouble for uh the Alliance of Free Stars.
Mhm. Yeah, but meanwhile, the Urquan have such a long back history that doesn't even really bubble up that much. And well, they all do. They all do have, and like the Slylandro have been on their gas giant for eons, and um, yeah,
Well, and also there are the things that matter to you may not even matter to the aliens. There's almost like in the spheres of influence are a good metaphor here, but there's a Venn diagram of what they care about, and like certainly the doctrinal conflict is an issue for everyone, but a lot of the aliens, I mean, especially if they're far away, I mean, the Udwig are just really concerned about the Ultron. They're not really thinking about anything else. And if you give the Ultron back, then they have a projected future that they're going to go on. And yes, you still have to save the galaxy, but you can imagine the prehistory before you ever met them, and then there's sort of a future that's going to be built up, which we never revealed to the player. You don't get to like after you save the day, there's no postlude where you go around and say, oh, well, what are the Udwig doing? And like, what's your next 5 years look like? You get to imagine it as the player, though, which is the part that, I thought is cool is, well, these aliens are going to keep living and keep existing. They are not plot points for me. I'm the intersection, I'm the Venn diagram coming into their universe for a little while, and then they're carrying on their way, which I thought was cool.
And I do like that even like even the doctrinal conflict itself is like actually the Ors and the Arilu are probably going to be fine even if like the universe does get destroyed, right? They're just going to peace out. You've come up with something so big and so cataclysmic. But also there are still things that are bigger than that. There are still things that are above all that.
or below. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. How do you use an asterisk in voice text? I don't know. Voice text? Wow, I really know the good words here. Yeah, that's what I'll just say that is one of our challenges too. Not even just the intro, but the idea of there's a universe with stakes, but we want to make sure that there's still a universe with stakes or more bigger and bigger things. Of course, we can make jokes about, certain fiction or movies or whatever where that just have to keep raising the stakes. Could talk about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and like, okay, I guess now it's a kaiju thing, and there's all sorts of tropes about that. But how do you follow that up when we already had a universal, like, this is a race that is going to extinguish all life in the galaxy? Like, where do we go from here? This is my way of tricking you into answering the question and say, what would you do?
Like the thing that I really wonder about is like working on a sequel after so long. I know that like every time I looked at the wiki, there'd be like talking like here's a citation of a Usenet post where you talked about some of the things that like you thought you might end up doing, or like here's what I was thinking at the time. And like, do you if you can't answer this, I understand, but do you feel like the direction you're going with the a sequel is the stuff that like you were thinking about? Because like I don't know, when you make a game, you always think about like what would come next, right? I feel like it's impossible to not think about like the potential sequel just in the back of your head. Do you think this is?
Oh, I mean, we've been thinking of a sequel since we stopped the last one. Uh, our careers got in the way, but now that we've sort of passed through the that arc of our careers, we could come back to it and meet up again with uh, the characters and aliens that we loved and some new ones too. Um, so I'd say that we've definitely been thinking about it for all of these years.
Do you feel like it's this is you're excited to like finally pick up the threads that you've been thinking about for so long, or is it like now like oh I'm interested in totally different themes now. I'm interested in like I go in a totally different direction.
Now we both,
Has it evolved, or is it just like you've been dying to get into these things for so long?
well, we both of us, and all of us actually love science fiction. And so we've been influenced over the years by numerous, not just Jack Vance, but all sorts of other science fiction writers. And that's maybe changed some of the things we might have expressed in a new story. But space opera is kind of timeless. Um, and so, yeah, the form or the expression might probably has changed over the year, but telling a good space opera, I don't think that changes too much.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I wasn't. Well, maybe this isn't obvious. I didn't work on the Archon Masters, so I wasn't there. I was still growing up when that game was being worked on. The thing that I've seen as sort of like listening to Fred and Paul talk and other people too on the team talk is there's um space opera is timeless, and then there's elements of what makes this a like we even have to re-ask ourselves what makes this a Urquan Masters universe, right? We just talked about it a little bit today about aliens 100% are committed to and believe in what they're doing. That's like a very solid piece to grab onto. It's interesting you reference Star Trek because that sort of sense of you're the captain and these are my words, but you're on a science mission is kind of the spirit. Your job is to explore and learn things. Yeah, I mean, you might have to pull out the guns if you have to, but ultimately you need to know things, and your job, nobody knows what's going on. You're the captain, you're the hero, and you have to save the day. Those are just kind of core conceits. Nobody else is going to do it, right? What's interesting is, their characters, I don't want to say, their races run, but that's, in shorthand, that's kind of like, yeah, we had them. That character was there. They got to have a great story. They were exciting. And then, the sun rises and the sun sets, and we don't need them back, right? Then there are characters who, we'll just take Fwifo, which is like, well, that character's so much fun to have around. It's not even necessarily about getting more of their story. It's about the energy and the like joy and the their presence brings. And one thing that I guess I don't know how it's changed or evolved, but the creative attitude around it, and somebody else even put it this way, and I'm going to use their words because they're better than anything I could come up with, which is meeting new aliens feels like getting a reward. like the same way you would get an upgraded sword in some RPG or whatever. It's like just by meeting someone, I felt like I got rewarded. And so that kind of spirit of continuing the story, in some ways, there is a story, but in a lot of ways, it's well, who's in the story? Who am I meeting? Who's the reward I get to meet? And like, how is it a treasure? Like when I first encounter Fufo and he starts telling me about himself, like you called that out as like so memorable. It's like, okay, well, this is a starbase captain. Here's something totally off the wall that I just never saw coming. And it kind of brings me into that universe. So like for me, not having had it live in my head quite as long, but seeing it evolve, I see the desire to I would say reward the player, by getting to meet these aliens. And that's the cool, I guess, spirit.
I'm sure that must be a tough thing about doing a sequel too, because like as much as you want to, like you want to both continue the story, continue the ideas, like pull on those hooks that you put in there, but also like a big part of like as you say, the thrill of the Urquan Masters is meeting new aliens, right? Like that's what's so cool about it, is that there's so much new stuff, there's new mysteries, there's new you get to learn what their deal is, you get to learn what their conflicts are. You're being introduced to all these ideas. And I feel like it has to be a struggle to, like both continue and, any sequel obviously has this where you have to continue that, but also you have to have something new. You have to have something that like evoke that awe at, oh my God, everything is so much bigger than I thought it was. Like you have that introduction that starts with this is about a simple war, and actually it's about cosmic history, and like your world just becomes so much bigger. And I imagine, like it's easy when, you're writing the introduction, but now you have a whole game that be like, all right, how do I make your world bigger again? I assume must be one of the
Yeah, well,
the challenges.
for one, it's in a new section, so that'll all be new. But yes, there are high stakes.
Yeah. I like Fred's terse answer. My terse, not joking answer is you're right. It's really hard. It is a challenge, and I have a currently in flight, don't know if it'll ever be published, 25-page long blog post exactly on this and what it means to continue a sequel. And, I'm kind of the odd duck because it's, I'm here because of, Fred and Paul and the game and us getting together to work on this. And I've worked on them on worked with them, not worked on them. Thank goodness. I've worked with them on many other projects. But I guess my attitude, it changes a lot and I learn a lot as we go. And I feel really confident saying this, again, one developer to another. This is maybe not our marketing message, or it could be a fun marketing tagline, but I'm confident we're not going to get everything right. There's only one thing I'm sure of is we're not going to get everything right. That's put that on the billboard. The 3 stars, Children of Infinity. We're not going to get everything right. But
I mean,
the
thank
idea
God, right?
is,
Otherwise, you wouldn't like if you're getting everything right, that means you're doing stuff with easy answers. You're doing stuff that like has already been done.
yeah.
Who wants that?
And like something Fred said, I'm gonna borrow your words, Fred, is the Orquan Masters was of its time too. It was influenced by Sierra Adventurers and games were mean then and things like that. So we have license to do, say, hey, well, what makes this a sequel? Well, the spirit of the creation now, happening now. We are different people. We've grown, like Fred said, we're reading, yes, I still love Jack Vance. I've reread a few this year. But I also love contemporary authors and, I could start listing things, but the kind of phrase I come back to is a little bit of like what you're getting at with the intro, which is it doesn't matter how interesting you think your universe is, sequel or otherwise. It's why does the player care? What's interesting to them? They maybe know nothing about it. They might be a new player. And I'm very mindful of maybe there's a player who's never met the Zokfot pick. I'm pretty sure if they met the Zokfot pick for the first time right now in 2024, they'd have a fun time because the Zokfot pick are like charming and lovable and they're goofy and they have a good shtick. So the spirit is very much like, yeah, there's a balancing act. Yeah, it's hard. I can talk about that. But at the same time, if the target is everything should be a gift to the player, and we just want to be a little more contemporary. Um, I don't want to say it makes answers easier, but it at least narrows down on what the end goal. It still has to do that. We still have to do that again. I don't know if that's just working or talking around the question because it is a really hard question. And even by the end of this, I think my answer will probably change. Fred, your answer might even change. I don't know.
I mean, I think all these things are balancing act, right? And like fundamentally, if you're making a big swing, it's a big swing.
Yeah.
You have to be ambitious about it. It has to be like something that's, you know, like I think
I mean, you were right. If the answers are easy, then you're probably not doing it right.
Yeah.
I feel like you do see that in sequels sometimes. Like video game sequels are either you know, you finally got to make two, and this is like you made the game that you originally envisioned, or you've turned it into like a machine assembly line going, all right, we did it that way in this one, we're going to keep doing it again. And it's not that either is wrong necessarily, but often you do want to capture the awe, the novelty, the newness of it. And even if you are like still also learning from where you came from before, like it's both. There's no like there's no extremes. It's always a little bit of one, a little bit of the other.
Yeah. And the actually it was again someone else who he spoke with, Mark Dara, I believe, said this is take and you said it now too a little bit, which is take what you wish you could have added that you couldn't have done then, especially with such a big time gap. And now that you can add that, try it, not with confidence that like this is what the game was missing. It needed this because the old game is there. You can still go play it. It's like for you picked up 2010 and it was tons of fun. Someone can pick it up now. It's not for everyone. It might be someone might be turned off by the size of the window, who knows what, but I'm confident that, someone can pick it up and have fun. It's never going to go away. So there's I don't want to say lightness to that, but there's this attitude of we don't want to compete with ourselves. We want to, take something and say, "Hey, that was great and it did these things that are wonderful." And it's like awesome to have like you and other people around who can say, "I love this. I played it. It was so good." It's the outcome and focusing on that outcome and saying, I just want, maybe I'm overly simplistic, but I want someone to be able to say that about whatever we do, what choices we make and not necessarily feel like, well, this is, off track. I mean, yes, would it start getting strange if certain things happened? Of course, but it's creative, like what's the size of your canvas? What colors are you using in your painting? There's so much there isn't an answer. You kind of have to start trying. um, but the spirit of the outcome, which is, this is a joy for players. This is a present, just what you're bringing up. Um, I want to know more. I don't get to learn everything in this. That's an important part of just sequels, period, right? If you're going to even make more sequels or more, continue to tell a story, but even a story that finishes is like, you can't tie the whole thing up. You have to leave a little mystery. And I think like Fred, was it you said, for every mystery or for every question you answer, create even more mysteries on top of that.
It sounds like something I might have said.
Yeah. And so
I
like that's
mean,
one way to carry on what was started is like, yeah, we can pick that up and carry it. We're not going to take the rope all the way across the finish line, or we're going to take one rope across the finish line and then start three threads off of it, and they're never going to get there. You're going to have to wait again, or that's what the player will be thinking is like, oh, but what's going on? And the richness has to be there, and it's not going to be there by tying everything up into a neat package. I hope.
there's a Philip K. Dick essay that I really love, which is how to build a universe that won't go away when you stop looking at it. I don't know if I got the title quite, but something like that. And it's like this is just stuck with me because like fundamentally like you do have to have things in the margins. You have to have questions that never get answered. The real world doesn't have questions that are all tidily answered. You don't have a complete understanding of everything. Um, Part of it is if everything was tidily answered, you'd stop caring after you played. You'd be like, you'd see
Yeah,
credits roll and you're like, all
exactly.
right, well, I got the whole story. I don't need to think about that anymore. Whereas like if you think you saw half of the in-game content and even that like had like a bunch of questions, they stick with you. The universe remains while you think about it. It exists in the back of your head. And you can't answer anything or it just doesn't have that longevity. Like the game doesn't just exist, in the code or on the screen. It exists in the player's mind and you have to leave something with them.
Yeah, I agree.
100%. And I would even leverage that even more. Like I think games have an ace up their sleeve too, which is, players get to have their unique experience walking through that world, right? And they didn't all walk the same path. They didn't all connect with the same things. Of course, we can all sit around and watch a movie and I might, I saw a movie over the weekend and I have a favorite part and it was this one scene, even though it was linear, but it was up to me to decide that was my favorite part. Games up the stakes by saying, well, just what you were talking about earlier, which is I made something cool happen. My experience in the game, what the questions I have are a direct result of my actions and the kind of, I mean, this sounds so like highfalutin, but like the level of connection and the way I relate to something that I actually put my fingers into and manipulated and stirred is very different from like, I mean, look, I love reading. It's great, but I don't connect with it the same way.
Yeah, and I think like, if two different people go to see a movie together, they will have a they'll have seen the same thing and you talk about it and your impressions aren't going to be completely identical, right? You're coming in with, like what you brought in, your difference in perspective and like how that influences the way, your personal taste and whatever. So like even then, like even seeing the same thing, it's a little bit different. And then games just amplify that because the act of actually experiencing it is all also completely filtered through like, well, in this case, I would, I'd pick this option. I'd go to this place first. This was my path through the game. And, you know, it turns to comparing two people's different experiences, which are also like influenced by, like what they brought in. But it's not just what you brought in, but it's also like your very path is different. And I don't know, it's also just like it's when a game is big enough, like open world stuff, something's anything like Urquan Masters, it's fun to compare notes, right? Like someone else saw stuff that I didn't hear about. I don't I missed an entire alien species. Oh, you can tell me about it. And that's that's just part of the way it lives on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, quote the songs, give them something to talk about. I guess that's the that's the can-do spirit for the for what we're trying to do. It's easy. We'll just do that. You know, done. Uh, but it is challenging, and I think like you're bringing up how sequels carry a certain gravitas, and now like I don't know. I guess I'm of the age where I've seen sort of my childhood come back to life in new ways, right? And like, oh, reboots of things, and well, we're remaking all these old franchises we have been away for a while. Um, I'm really just curious, like, how have you related, either positively or negatively, to like, okay, there's the Pokemon. Pokemon has not gone away for a long time. Pokemon has just been happening forever and ever and ever since Pokemon started. You know, how do you feel about sort of, hey, this is something I hesitate to use the word nostalgia, that can be powerful, but let's just say perhaps a nostalgic relationship with, or an appreciation of something that is in the past, maybe even a further past. Have you been able to approach that and go creatively, like, what would I do here to bring this up? Or have you seen it done creatively and resonated with you? Like, what components did you pick up on in that?
I think it's a tough one. I think like I don't know, like I look at a lot of like as you say, I'm finally hitting the age where they're remaking everything from my childhood, and like half the time, like, oh, that's exciting. I'm getting to see something that I have fond memories of revisited. And another time, like, I saw this. Why are you doing this again? This feels very cynical. It feels like you're trying to sell me something again. And um, I don't know, like it's tough, right? Like if the magic gets broken, if
Mm.
they I grew up really liking Iron Man comics, and I was the only person I knew reading Iron Man at the time. And now it's like, oh, I'm kind of sick of Marvel movies, right? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
they broke the magic for me. It turned into such a clean product that like I just watch one of these things now. I'm like, all right, we are going to waste a bunch of time so you can sell me an advertisement for the next movie. And like the thing that's magical about it simply doesn't click. Whereas like I look at, like Star Trek also gets revisited all the time, right? And like it's about like what does this mean? What new perspective is being brought there? And sometimes it clicks and sometimes it doesn't. And at the same time, like it's also just an opportunity for, like uh, new people to experience that, right? Like with an Urquan Master sequel, I'll finally be able to say, "Hey, this is a game that I really loved. Here's an excuse to go check out that universe again." Like the new Star Trek series, Strange New Worlds, is like I'm introducing Star Trek to people who have never who maybe are a little too young to have like remembered like the heyday of the Next Generation. It's I think it can be both things. I think it's interesting that culture can like exist on like such a large time scale, and sometimes it's cynical, sometimes it's like very exploitative. Here's the thing you love, we're selling it to you again. But sometimes like it actually is kind of magical to bring that to, either a new audience or after so long to reevaluate what does this mean now? What is this now in the 2020s versus what was it like in the 90s? Because inevitably it's gonna be informed by what is culture worried about? What are the things that I'm worried about? What is society worried about? What are the big overriding themes of our time? Even you can't avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Fred? I was.
Well, with Urcon Masters in particular, uh, I mean, we definitely still have diehard fans who experienced it when it came out, but it's such a long gap in between when we made it and now that we can't help but think about new fans who didn't encounter the first one and may never go back to play it. Um, so I don't know how much, how many hundreds or thousands of people will be affected by nostalgia for this, but I don't think it'll be a huge fan base of old fans.
But we do have a lot of those people, and we also really appreciate and I mean, they've kind of kept the game alive in a lot of ways. I don't want to mince words, too much, but hey, the open source release, it's the community that's been keeping this thing alive for a long time because, yeah, we were, Fred was doing other work, Paul was doing other work, right? So there's a lot of kind of community spirit and just, hey, this thing still has relevance. And yeah, of course, I shouldn't say of course, but I'm glad that you can pick up the game in 2010 and play it and it means something to you. That was my experience too, even later. And that's great. It has staying power there. But the reason the name can mean something is also because of our community. So we have, uh, you know, we want to make everybody happy, I guess, in some ways, but at the same time, you know, uh, if the end result isn't good, if it isn't fun for a new player, for anyone, then what's the point of any of the other stuff? So there's kind of an overriding principle there. And while you're talking, I kind of thought about what did it the best for me. And this is an unfair example because it's easy to look at the outliers, and you brought up Iron Man. And I was trying to think, what did it for me? What did it for me? And I thought, oh, Mad Max Fury Road, that was actually better than Mad Max ever was, right? And I even liked the originals, but I thought about that, and I don't tend to like action movies per se, or I don't even watch that many movies, but I just think about the last time since Fury Road that I was sitting in a theater going and not even noticing that time passed because I was totally glued to the screen was like Everything Everywhere All at Once. And that's the time gap for me. It's taken since Fury Road. I don't even know how 10 years ago. I don't even know how long we have to go back for that to like last year. I think last year. Time is tough after COVID, but everything everywhere all at
Yeah.
once. And it's like, well, I wasn't sitting there watching Mad Max Fury Road thinking, oh, Mad Max, I'm back in this universe. It reestablished its universe immediately, very quickly. It gave me a protagonist who is incredibly interesting that I cared about. And through just a lot of cinematography and action sequences, it told a story in a very unique way that just grabbed me. And so, I mean, I could use that phrase to describe, same thing with everything at once. It's like, well, it grabbed me. Um, Same thing with Urquell Masters. And so is it a sequel? Is it new? I don't want to say it goes out the window, but hey, part of not making it a cash grab is like, yeah, again, same thing going in reverse. It's easy to pick on Marvel movies because there's so many of them, but it's like, hey, the thing writes itself, the thing does itself. Yes, we've all been there, but I mean, obviously they keep selling, so people like them, not necessarily for me. But if we make it with the spirit and intent of, well, I want someone to jump into this universe and be happy to be there, right? Whether they've been here before or it's their first time here, as like that's my wish. I guess that's my voice, my version of it. Um, but the real answer, this is just a corporate cash grab. So I'll just get that out of the way. Like all of the choices we're making is just we're in it for the money. So I don't know. I just I'll put the like human skin suit back on now. I just had to let that drop, but okay. But yeah, I really like I guess my relationship with that is, well, can I get pulled in and can it feel fresh, even if it's old? Because I don't want to be sitting there. Maybe I would go to the theater because I know the name or it reminds me of, oh, I'm going to be with Fufo again. Yay. And that's like a fun thing that's going to get me in my seat. But I have to be in the seat and I have to feel like I'm somewhere new again.
Absolutely. And I do think like a big part of it is like you mentioned like Fury Road, like the first Mad Max after like however long. Like that was I hadn't seen any of those. I completely missed that. I'm too young. But like I watched that one not because, it was a sequel, but because everyone said it was a very cool action movie. And, after loving them, like, oh, I can look back and like there are other there's older movies that like I could look at if I wanted to. I watched I watched the first one and it definitely feels like it was made on $8,000, but like, it's fascinating to see like that was that sort of vision. And that's like something that I don't know, like that's something that I can talk to with people who have seen these movies for longer. And like you mentioned, the community has kept Urquan Masters alive. But also, like, isn't it cool that like that community is gonna get even bigger with more people like going, damn, the sequel's great. I want to know I finally I can talk about the I can talk about the Urquan with all these people who already know. Like
Yep. Yeah.
I think community shouldn't be insular, right? It's great when people get to join the community of things that you love. It's good to have like something that like pulls more people in.
I'm going to ask for your explicit permission to borrow your words and put them in a quote somewhere because that's like, you're speaking my language, which is like, I mean, I don't know. We all have different communities we thrive in our lives. And I think about, my most insular communities, from this is again me speaking, most insular communities tend to disintegrate because there's nothing fresh, nothing new is happening. I mean, yes, I have my old friends. We tend to dwindle as we get smaller. I have a few old friends that I talk to. The most exciting communities are the ones where there's a there's an kinetic energy to change. Something can happen, something new. I'm always looking for, I think we're all drawn to novelty, right? And so yes, the familiarity and the comfort of the people I know and love, I love being around them. But oh, there's new friends, or like, oh, someone has a partner and I'm meeting them for the first time. All of that change is so exciting. And so just what you said, like, I don't know how it feels for you, Fred. I'm curious when I'm done here, but like that just warms me up a lot too, because I think about our community and something that's on my mind is what is the greatest gift I can give to a fan, right? Is it more time with Fufo? Is it Fufo dating simulator? Is it like it can go crazy? And I just think, well, I think about the things I love. So this actually came up in our community very recently, which is someone out of nowhere posted the song Another Satellite by XTC, or Andrew Partridge, is the songwriter for XTC, or one of the songwriters. And I was like, did you read my mind? XTC is, I mean, Andy Partridge is my favorite songwriter and just my personal favorite, and XTC might be my favorite band. And so I thought, wait a minute, if I could just walk to people, if I could go to 10 people and say, you got to listen to this stuff, it's great. That's what I like to do, share that interest. And so what you're talking about is like, wait a minute, I think one of the best things we can do for our fans is give them new fans so that they can have new people come in and they can say, this thing that I love, finally more people appreciate it and they're here to enjoy it with me. And yes, now we can talk about the Urquan and oh, finally someone understands what I'm talking about, you know? And that is like a really nice gift.
Absolutely. I love it.
I don't know, Fred, what do you think? What do you think?
I'm such a I'm such a hard introvert that
I know.
yeah, it it sucks my energy to put myself out too far.
That's fine. You know, that's that's why we work well together. I can talk and talk and talk, and Fred's not. Why don't you stop talking? But you know, like seriously, Chrissy, like what you said is very inspiring because it is, you know, like I, I I don't want to sound like a you know a maniac, but this is a we're a tiny team, you know, and it's a big project and it's got big shoes to fill. There's a lot of pressure, and you know, I could talk at length about all of that. But you know, talking with you and hearing about, you know, thinking about, oh, what is this? Like it seriously swims in my head. It's the under it is, you know, I don't want to say this is not the beginning of some like someone's going to make a documentary about how I lost my sanity working on this game or whatever. You know, it's not what this is, but the idea is like that's the stuff that really is the undercurrent in my mind is, you know, well, what do I want? Well, what would a fan want? Well, what would a new player want? I mean, that's the stuff that just lives there because, you know, I don't know if everybody's this way when they work on things, but I care about the player. I want the player to experience something and have a good time. And, you know, it always comes back to that. And with a community like what we have that's kept this alive, that's almost its own entity. That's part of who this is for. And so saying like, hey, part of this is to make that community feel, I don't want to say honored. That's the wrong word. I'm reaching for it here. I want to say that community feel like they have new friends and that we've brought this thing, I want to say back from the dead. It never died, but you know, it's been a long time gap. You know, we've brought this thing to life again and raised it back up and given it this new dose of energy. You know,
A
that is
zombie.
something. Well, yeah, I like the way you think. Yeah, now we're back to the corporate making money version. But look, it's still alive and kicking. But you know, that is something like I at least think about a lot. And you know, I think we as creators, of course, we want things to be good. Of course, we want things to be great, you know, and I guess thinking of it as a gift or what's the best thing I could do for someone, right? I want them to have fun. I want them to have a good time. And especially for a community that really has done a lot of work for us keeping this alive. I want to make sure they get something out of this. And that angle is honestly very fresh and exciting to me to hear you say that. Like, oh, that's what you want. Oh, cool. That's really great.
That's really exciting to me. I feel like whenever I think about like, you know, like what do the fans want to see? What do the people who have gotten me all this way that I'm, you know, immensely grateful for everything that they gave me, for everything, for all the support they've given me. How do I satisfy that? Like, well, probably I shouldn't look at them cynically. I probably shouldn't look at them as like people who just want to have like check boxes marked, right? They want to see something new. They want to see something fresh. They want to see something that excites me. That's what got them in the first place was like they saw something that had full creative energy poured into it, not like something that was seen as a checklist. So how can I make the fans happy? By just by having fun with it myself, by trying to do something that excites me. And you know, I think anything less than that is just like cynical. I think it's anything less than that is just like it's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, cynical is the right word, and I think we brought it up earlier, which is if you're just doing the easy answers, you know, then is that what people really want? I think they might, they could some people could go for that, but is it going to create the kind of energy that has kept this thing alive for so long and that can give it legs and make it, I mean, I didn't work on it, so I can talk it up as much as I want. Timeless and sort of this thing that someone can pick up, that's that positive attitude towards your own creation. And, I like that you use the word cynical, because cynicism is the death of many things, right? And, we have to avoid cynicism in all walks of life, but especially here, you think about, well, what am I doing? What's the point of all this? If I get cynical about, I have to check the boxes, I have to make sure these things happen. No, people are here, just like you said, I agree. They're here for your energy and what did I mean, what is it, the thing that got you so excited that you wanted to do something? And, they'll be along for the ride, I guess, is my attitude. It doesn't mean like, hey, it's not in space anymore, that's not like that. But there's no hard lines here, or there are lines, they're just not, can be absurd. But it's the energy you bring towards it, which is, oh, but I want you to enjoy this. I want you to enjoy this as if, you know, I I'm giving you the gift and you don't know what's in the box and you're going to unwrap it and you're going to be surprised and you're going to have fun and the aliens are presents. All of these sort of spirits of like not checking the box really are unlocking for me too. Sorry, I have a little bit of avian. Okay, they're fine. There's birds in here. They've been very obedient and quiet. So well, I mean, gosh, I'm so happy we were able to get so much of both of your time, especially Fred, the poor introvert pulling his teeth right now. But you especially too. I think I booked this for an hour or something, but probably should try to wrap up. I want to respect your time. But like I did want to ask, like, do you have questions for us? But while we're here, is there anything else that's on your mind?
I feel like I got the big ones in right away because I mean, yes, I have tons of questions, but I don't.
Can't reveal
What
all the
is?
mysteries. Sorry.
Yes, exactly.
The price for that information will be
That's right. My bridge turned brown behind me.
How
Yeah.
did the color change?
yeah, you could do that with your background. You should do that. Just don't say anything in the middle of the meeting, hot pink or something. No, just no facial expression. Oh, this? That's what I would
Cost is
do.
too high. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. I'm glad. Thank you so much for all of your time
Yeah,
and
thanks.
joining us and like your enthusiasm and energy and questions. And like, I don't know. It's awesome to have you here, Fred.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure, and I'm just very excited. I'm very excited by everything we talked about, and I'm really looking forward to. I'm just looking forward to playing it. So thank you so much for this great chat.
Yeah, we're
Great.
looking forward to
Yeah.
playing it too. All right. Um,